Look this morning at April's deadly avalanche on Mount Everest.
It was a huge avalanche and a huge powder blast. We got all out of the tent to see the avalanche. And we got powder blasted from both sides.
That is Jim Davidson of Colorado. He spoke with CBS This Morning 3 days after the Nepal earthquake. Davidson was at the so-called Camp 1 when the avalanche hit. He was rescued and flown to base camp by helicopter. There he connected with friend and fellow climber Jon Kedrowski. The geographer captured these images. You can see the base camp was also devastated. Both climbers just returned to the United States, and we welcome them to Studio 57. Thank you so much for being here.
Really. You're alive. We're so glad. We're so glad.
Are you ready to go back?
Yeah, I'd go back in a second, I think.
Why? You've already done it.
I think mountains are my passion, and I think it's just a place that I really have a connection to, actually, is Nepal as a whole.
Yeah, that was your second time. That was your second time, Jon.
Yeah, I was really fortunate to summit in 2012, and to return was really more emotional, I think, and just more of a connection again to the mountains and to the people of Nepal, even.
Jim, you didn't say. Would you go back? And your wife is in the green room watching you.
Yes, I'll keep that in mind. Thanks.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm waiting to see how the mountain stabilizes, how the mountain community, and including the Sherpa people, recover a little bit, and to see where I'm at. So I may go back. I have to give it some thought.
Jon, describe what it was like when the avalanche hit.
Well, it was the incredible shaking of the glacier first, and that was really fascinating. But then sort of, for me, it went from being the ski mountaineer climber to the scientist side of me and understanding it, and then seeing this giant wall of white come down from the side of the amphitheater, and that was really scary.
Mm-hmm. I know. Last time you were here, we talked to you shortly after it happened, and you were by telephone, and I asked you what it's like when you feel that you're going to die. And I'll ask the same question to you.
I was at Camp 1, and when the earthquake happened, we had avalanches. It was cloudy and coming at us. We couldn't see how big the avalanches were, and when I came out of the tent, I thought there's a pretty good chance we're not going to survive this. But even in that few seconds you have, you try and optimize your chances of survival by putting on hats and coats and avalanche beacons. And even if you don't survive, hopefully they'll be able to find you. So you're still trying to optimize your survival, even in those last few seconds when the uncertainty is pretty high.
You know, I don't want to die. That's what I was wondering about that, too.
In that circumstance, what it was, I heard the avalanche is coming, so I quickly put on my avalanche beacon, turned it on, and secured it again so that they'd maybe find me alive, or maybe find me if I passed away, and put on a hat and coat so we could survive under the snow a little bit better. But literally, you're just trying to increase your chances just a little bit to try and make it through if you can.
I have no desire to die, but I just don't want to die terrified. Was terror what you felt when you were standing there seeing and hearing what you were hearing?
I think I would say extreme anxiety, because you're afraid to die and you're trying to optimize your circumstances of yourself and your partners, but not quite terror, because that can sort of immobilize you, but instead just trying to push through the terror to try and find a way to improve your chance a little bit. So extreme anxiety, but still trying to make some progress and do the best you can.
And the scary part of that day was the fact that it was really foggy. So normally on a clear day, you could see where it was coming from. Instead, this giant roar comes from all around us, whether we were in base camp, whether we was up in Camp 1, and you had no idea where it was coming from until it was almost on you. And then when you saw it getting that close, then that's where it was really just
the roar is a roll of snow.
Yeah, snow and ice, and then in base camp especially was this big serac that collapsed and hit the side of the glacier, and then a giant compressed air mass came across base camp. So it wasn't your typical avalanche that we think of here with some powder snow with it, but mainly in base camp a compressed air blast that obliterated tents. And I described the scene as something from like the Midwest, where you have debris and chunks of tents and tent poles and rocks getting tossed everywhere.
Jim, talk about your evacuation.
Well, we were pinned down at Camp 1 for about 42 hours because the ropes that connect us back to base camp had disappeared in the ice fall. Literally, our whole route had disappeared under collapsed ice. And then we knew we were pinned down for a while, and eventually they realized there may be a storm coming, so we need to get some helicopters in and get this roughly 140 climbers from the upper mountain back to base camp. So got on a helicopter, and it was a 2-minute ride to descend 2,600 feet, like a 3-dimensional spiral along the glacier.
Why did you want to climb Everest?
Yeah.
I wanted to go there to learn the most I could about myself and my fellow climbers and the human capacity. You know, it's a physical challenge, but it's a mental and spiritual challenge as well. And in this case, we didn't get to test ourselves up high on the summit, but I learned probably more about humanity and the people around me by being inspired how tenacious the medical crew was, and the climbers and the Sherpas in base camp. and how resilient the people were as we came down the valley, watching people rebuild their houses and having a good spirit about the future. So I didn't learn as much from climbing to the top of the mountain, but I learned a lot from the people around me.
Beautifully said.
As resilient as you are, too. It's a very scary thing that you both
Thank you.
survived.
Yeah, it's quite a test of yourself and your teammates, and you do
Yeah.
learn a lot about yourself and others in the process.
Well, thank you for being here. Glad
you.
you're so safe.
Thank you both.